So, 30 years ago, found myself laying in a hospital bed, flat on my back, looking straight up in the air. Now, the hospital bed I was in the ICU ward of a burn unit of a level 1 trauma center in Memphis, Tennessee, where I was working. So when I was coming out of the anesthesia and I was looking straight up in the air, my eyes were trying to focus, but what they were focusing on was my arms. My arms were suspended straight up above my head, looked like a rat, big frame. And as I was able to focus more and more, I realized what I was looking at was 2 arms without hands, nothing there. So as I was able to get out of the hospital, it was a process, but as quick as that happened in the moment it took to have that accident or that incident, it took years to get there. So that's what I'm here to tell you about. Now I want to talk to you about that, and I want to tell you that every one of you in this room, you're on a journey right now anyway. You're on a journey to be a safer employee, I hope. If you're not on that journey, you're on the journey that I was on. And you see where that landed me. Take what I'm going to tell you, learn from it, because this all I am here for is to give you information. Very valuable information to take back with you and to keep you alive and to keep the people that work for you alive. So, I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to talk to you about how my accident happened. Then I'm going to tell you what it cost me. Then I'm going to tell you the personal cost of it. Now, I can't tell you the monetary cost of my accident. See, that's something that companies have to deal with. You don't know the monetary cost of this accident, because I'll never know what it is until I'm dead. From 1991, when my accident happened, until today, it is always going to add money, 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 money. Very expensive. It'll be in the millions and millions of dollars. At least. It probably is now in millions of dollars, but it'll be more than that by the time I'm dead. So, what I want you to do is to focus on the people in your life. Okay? The people that love you and care about you. I want you to take this home with you and use it and apply it there, because this is not just about work only. Okay? Remember I told you it took me years to get where I was to that moment that I had my incident in. That was because of years of shortcuts, learning how to work quick, fast, get the job done, not following all the rules because, I just knew a better way. And I was damn good at what I did. So what I did, my occupation was a lineman. Everybody here know what linemen do? Okay, so lineman, I worked for a municipal utility in Memphis, Tennessee. So as a lineman, I was in overhead distribution and transmission. I mean, we handled all the energy, the electricity that was outside. If it's on a pole or a tower, I climb poles and towers for a living. If it's on a pole or a tower, it's our responsibility, underground or overhead or underground. That was our job. So once it comes into a building, it goes to an electrician. With the utility I worked for, I was an overhead distribution lineman. Now, to tell you a little bit about how we were set up, at our company, TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, brought all our power in. It came into Memphis to what we call gate stations. When it came in, it broke down into our transmission system, which was a 161,000 volt transmission system. I worked on that. We built our own towers, but I also worked on the distribution. So when it came out of our substations, it was a 23,000 volt system. 23 kV system was what I was working on the day I got injured. So we get to work this Monday morning. I got hurt August the 12th. It's a Monday morning. So 30 years ago, this month was my actual injury. So we get to work, and we show up on our job site. And when we show up at the work center, and our superintendent gives us our job packet. We get our job packet, we get what we got to do that day. We load our trucks up, we get ready to go, we head out. We end up at this woman's house. Okay, so our job that day was to cut down a service going to her house. She had demolition part of her house and rebuilding a room onto her house, and we were going to take in, had to drop her service, hang her new service, because they rerouted the weatherhead. So whenever we got there, we pulled up out in front of the house, and we got out. I drove a 65-foot bucket truck every day. So we got there, we stopped in front of the house, 3 trucks, 6 men on our crew, and we get out of the truck. We have our tailgate meeting, toolbox meetings, tailgate meeting, whatever you want to call it. But ours was a tailgate meeting. Now we had no paperwork to sign off on. How many people were working back in the 70s and the 80s? You're the only one? Okay. Well, there wasn't like JSAs to sign off on. You didn't sign a piece of paper saying you've read it. We had a conversation behind the truck. That was it. Talked about what we were going to do. We did it. Everybody knew which direction to go. We broke up and went to work. Well, part of our job was to set a pole in the middle of this woman's backyard. So we're out rural, we're out in the country. I'm talking about the sticks. There's nobody around. We set this pole in the middle of her backyard. Now when we do that, her feed is coming off her backyard. So there is a circuit running across her back property line connecting the other houses and all the way down the line. So whenever I got there, I'm gonna set this job site up for you. So she's got a 3-phase circuit running north and south down her property line. The road she lived on ran north and south. Her driveway ran east and west. That put her house right in the middle. Follow me? Her feed come from back here into the house. So I had to back all the way down her driveway, get set up into my bucket truck, got out, and I would have normally climbed that pole anyway, but it was Monday and I didn't feel like doing it. So I backed my truck up, set it up in front of that pole. When I got out, I walked around the truck and I jumped up on the ladder and climbed the ladder, jumped up in the bucket, got ready to go to work. Now every day when we were working, we did the same thing. We all had leather work orders, okay? You know what I'm talking about? Leather, just plain leather work orders. Everybody has them on whatever job you do. We used them on the ground and on the in the warehouse, wherever we were working at, loading material on the truck, but you didn't wear them working primary. Because the way our system was set up, our contract with IBW was to work everything energized. In other words, we didn't kill anything. Everything we worked was hot. So we had class 3 rubber gloves, come all the way up to your elbows, sleeves that come from your wrist all the way up to your shoulders. So that was your PPE. That was our primary PPE. You had to have that to put on the other PPE on the wire. So whenever I got out of the truck, I had my leather gloves in my back pocket were always covered. So I walked around, jumped on the ladder, got up in the bucket, got ready to go to work. And whenever I did, I took the boom out of the crate. Well, before that, we had a grunt on the ground, and he walked over and he asked me, he said, "What do you want to work with?" I said, "Give me a pair of bolt cutters." So a pair of bolt cutters. And he did. He walked over to the tool bin, he handed me a pair of 3-foot metal handled red bolt cutters. You know what I'm talking about? Got them home in your garage. Might have them here. You probably got them in your businesses. You use them to cut locks and chains. There's nothing dielectrically tested about a pair of bolt cutters. Not these. Just ordinary. Well, he chunks them up to me and I stuck them in the tool pouch and I looked up to see what I was working on before I took the boom out of the cradle. And whenever I did, I could see everything where it was. Now the service I'm working on is an open wire service. In other words, it's not twisted like a triplex service. So there's a hot leg on the bottom, a hot leg in the middle, and a neutral on the top. All of that is stapled to a rack onto the side of that pole. Okay, so that's your open wire service, and it runs all the way to the weatherhead and goes into the house. That's the feed for the house. So whenever I got ready to go, all I had to do was cut down the service, let it hit the ground, hang the new one, make it up, finish the job. So I took the boom out of the cradle and I went up. Whenever I got set up in place, I've got the service right in front of me. Okay, it's within hand's reach, okay? hot leg right here, so I took the bolt cutters out, opened them up, and I cut the bottom hot leg when I did hit the ground. When I opened them up again, I cut the middle hot leg, it hit the ground. When I opened them up again, I went to go onto the neutral. Okay? Neutral conductor was on the top. On the sketch, there was a 24-inch gap between that neutral and a primary phase run the same way. So a 23,000 volt circuit, if you go phase to ground, that is a 13,200 volts. So whenever I opened up those bolt cutters, I went onto that neutral, and whenever I touched that neutral, this hand hit that primary conductor. And I have a pair of leather gloves on. So when it did, that's how my accident happened. That's how, now I say accident, it's not an accident. This was an incident. This was not an accident. Like I said, this was coming over the years. It was just fortunate that it only took off both of my hands. It very well should have killed me. No reason it should have not killed me. I should be dead today. But I wasn't. So when it did, I hit the bottom of the bucket. I mean, it blew up. You could hear it. If you've ever heard a transformer blow up, loud, obnoxiously loud, like dynamite. Just bam, I hit the bottom of the truck. Whenever I did, 70 feet away from me was that pole we had just set in this woman's backyard. Now on top of that pole was a buddy of mine, another lineman, that he had climbed that pole, and he was doing his job on that pole. The rest of the crew was at the weatherhead doing their job. He and I were the only people in eyesight of each other. He was about the same height off the ground I was, so we were in each other's field of vision. Now as soon as I made contact, he saw what happened. There was no way he could have stopped, put it that way. He just happened to see it when it happened. So whenever I got out of the hospital, I go back to the accident. Second, when I got out of the hospital, I had to ask. I said, you know, you're the only eyewitness to this entire thing. I've read the accident report. I've looked at the investigation. Everything there is about it, I've looked at and read. I said, what did you see? I said, you're the only one who could tell me that. What did you see? He said, well, whenever you made contact with that conductor, he said it blew up. You went to the bottom of the truck and you were dead before you hit the ground. Bottom floor of the bucket. Well, all right, sounds good. So he said, you know what, that's just the way it was. He said, I knew you were dead then. He said, I said, what'd you do? So I climbed down the bottom of the pole. He said, I ran over the base of the bucket. Have you ever seen these buckets out on the road? Have any of y'all ever seen them? If you look at them close, on the lower boom, there are a set of levers that protrude out. Okay, they're on there for maintenance purposes. If you do line work, they're called dead man levers, because whatever happens, you have to operate those levers to get whoever is up in the bucket down to the ground, because they're most likely dead. So whenever they did, they operated those levers and brought that bucket back down to the ground so they could see inside of it. Now whenever they do, I got 5 guys. 2 of them are up on the bucket, up on the toolboxes, waiting to get that thing down. The other ones are on the ground scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. They don't actually know what to do. See, the only thing we knew, we were trained in, is CPR. We were not trained in first aid. We didn't have any first aid training out there on our trucks, except for my buddy Brian, who saw this because he was going through his EMT training. So for me, I was very fortunate he was there. So whenever they brought the bucket back down, they had to look inside. And I tell people this all the time. Even if you are first aid trained, unless you're a trauma specialist, a nurse, you work on an ambulance, you have no idea what you're going to see in these accidents. You have no idea what you're going to pull out the bottom of a trench, of a bucket, of a manhole, whatever it is you're working on a warehouse floor. Accidents leave traumatic injuries, just like this. So when he did, he reached down that bucket and he had to grab me by my belt and pick me straight up. Stood me up on the toolbox. One guy grabbed one arm, grabbed the other one, and dragged me down the side of the toolbox. We stepped off into the bed of the truck and stepped off the steps into the yard, and they literally dropped me in the yard. Okay, so when he dropped me, I landed flat on my ass or my butt, and my hands just came to rest right here in my lap. And whenever they did, He said, yeah, he said, y'all, you were breathing at this point whenever your hands hit whenever your butt hit the ground. So, whenever my hands were right here, my buddy, his name is Brian, he plants himself, he stops, and he gets on his hands on his knees, and he's right here in front of me, face to face. Okay, he ain't leaving. He's gonna stay right here until the ambulance shows up. Now, our crew leader have already called our 911. They've already got the ambulance on the way. He also told them to send a helicopter because they're not going to transport. You're going to have to fly. So, anyway, we're sitting there, and he's face to face with me. And I looked down, and I said, my hands are on fire. I said, my hands are on fire. He said, look down. He said, no, they're not. He looked, but he looked down, and he saw them. And there was smoke coming out from the cuff of my left glove. Okay, it's still cooking inside. So it's still smoking. So he reached down, the whole thing he could do, he didn't have scissors, he didn't have any other way to get them off. He reached down and he grabbed the fingertips of both gloves and he snatched them straight off and he threw them on the ground. So we're sitting there with my hands sitting in my lap, and I'm trying to move them and they're not doing anything. They're not going anywhere, they're not moving, they're not picking up, they're just not responding to the signals my brain is sending to them. So ambulance, volunteer fire department shows up a few minutes later, first responders. When they get there, they can't do too much. It's a pickup truck and fire truck. So they waited, and the ambulance shows up out of the city of Memphis. About 8 minutes later, they pick me up, prep me, get me ready to go. Helicopter lands, they fly me straight to the med. And that's where I spent my hospital stay. So, what I want to ask you is this. I told you how we worked. We worked everything energized. We worked everything hot. And the rule that we had in our safety manual was very, very specific. Our rules were, if you are in reaching distance of a primary conductor, you will wear your primary voltage gloves. Those class 3 rubber gloves come up to your elbow. That was the rule. There were no ifs, ands, and buts. It didn't say you can, you could, you should. It said you will wear your rubber gloves. Now, when I got out of the truck and I got that bucket and I took that bucket out of the cradle and I got in front of there, I had on a pair of leather gloves. None of you guys in here are electricians, so I'm just going to tell you the answer to this question. At that time, in that era, we were trained to work low voltage electricity with leather gloves on. That's what those old linemen taught us how to do. Taught them how to do their job. It was a handed down practice. I call it a common practice. You'll never find the word common practice in a safety manual. It's not there. Safety manuals are black and white. They tell you what you can do, and what you will do, and what you won't do. That's it. Now, knowing that, what the safety rules said, and how my accident happened, tell me whose fault this accident was, because this wasn't a mechanical failure. Whose fault was the accident? Huh? Yes, everybody point their finger in this direction. That's exactly right. I did this. Okay, why? Because I did not follow the safety rules. I was better than that. I was smarter than that. We were cowboys back then. We did what we wanted to do back then. And it's caught up to me. Like I said, this was years in the making to get to that moment where I got burned. That's how it happened, because I did not follow the rules. You guys, this place is full of highly qualified safety professionals that you all depend on if you're one of the businesses that come underneath here. These people are trained, they're educated, they're qualified to teach you safety. That's their job. Why am I here? I'm not smarter than they are. They're smarter than I am. I'm not at all smarter than them. The reason is because there is a probability that any of your safety professionals that you run into, no matter where you are, have never been traumatically injured on the job. And they'll tell about it, and they'll stand here and talk to you and tell you everything that you need to know. They're educated, but they don't have the experience and the knowledge and all the things that I went through all for 30 years that I can tell you that they can't. That's why companies all over the world hire me to come in here and to teach people what they have to look forward to if they don't follow the rules. It may not be this bad, and then again it may be worse and it may kill you. Depends on your occupation. But by the time I'm through telling you all of this, I'm hoping that I take you off of a path that I was on if you're on that path, and I put you on that path that leads you to be a safer employee. That is my goal for being here. So as I got to the hospital, I met my surgeon, and he and I talked, and that was the last conversation we had till I woke up and looked up and saw my arms above my head. And that's how they suspended them. They suspended them on a rack, had webbing and mesh all around them, and hooked them to a hook, and they kept them up over my head the entire time I was asleep. I had 6 surgeries in 5 days. So I'm going to show you a picture. Oh, not that one. Not that one. I'll come back to those. That's it. Go back one. You can see it. That's what my hand looked like sitting on the operating table. It's very dehydrated looking. It sucked all the moisture out of it. 13,200 volts took every bit of the moisture out of it, cauterized the blood flow, the nervous system, lymphatic system, the veins, the arteries. Everything from the wrist down was dead. Nothing alive. So I really had no choice but to take them off. But I had 6 surgeries over the course of 5 days. At the end of 5 days, that's what was left. I have an elbow, and I have if you go halfway between your elbow and your wrist and stop, that's where mine stops. Both of them are identical, cut in the same place. Whenever electricity goes into your body, okay, it's got to come out. That's just the way it works. Electricity goes in, it's got to come out somewhere. Where it comes out, you'll never know. I mean, you'll know, but you can't predict where it will come out. The majority of the men and women I've talked to, especially the men over the years that I've talked to doing this, it tracks straight through their body. It comes out of the lower extremity using the foot, blows the foot off, half of it, whatever. You can't determine where it's going to come out at. Mine, as soon as it went in, it went into the left hand, into the bolt cutters, traveled up the handle of the left bolt cutter, up my left arm, and came out under my left armpit. That was my exit wound. It blew out under my left armpit. So when it did, there's a mark, you can't see it, there's a burn right about there. That's where it blew out at. About 4 stitches sewed it up, and you really can't even tell it today. But that is the way electricity works, and all that was just the staples and stitches that sewed it up at the end that really got the amputation. This is what I want you to understand. This is how serious this is. This is nothing to play with, and it doesn't have to be electricity. I don't care what you work with or what you work around. There's a reason why you have rules and regulations. There's a reason why they tell you how you should work a piece of machinery, how you should work in a certain situation. There's a reason why it takes time to do this. For your sake, I told you I want you to think about the people that you love, because they're the ones you're going to go home to tonight. What's going to happen if you don't? Just the financial implications of what can happen if you're the paycheck, one of the paychecks that doesn't come into that house. Be devastated. Trust me, I know. Just, you never know what's going to happen. You can't tell. You don't know how it's going to react, how people are going to react to it, how your family's going to interact with you. These are all things you don't know. So the slide before that was the leadership, okay? So every one of you in this room are leaders. I don't care what your role is at your company, you are a leader. If you choose to follow the rules, whatever they are, however they are, if you choose to do that, you are doing something by setting an example to everyone around you to follow that example. They follow your example, you go home safe at night, probability is they're going to go home safe tonight too. I don't care who you are, you're a leader. Act like one. Don't be a follower. Don't follow some guys and some men or women that tell you, oh, you don't really have to do that. You know, that rule really, you know, you can bypass that. That's crap. I don't care if it's in there and you don't like it, you better do it. It's there for a reason. Not to piss you off, not to make your life more miserable. It's there for a reason. That's to keep you safe, send you home at night. So, communication. I talk to companies all the time about communication. Think about working with people. It's one of the biggest things that I find when I go to a company. Not a company, but a lot of companies will tell me, you know, it's just horrible. Our communication's terrible. You know, we don't know how to talk to each other. We don't know how to get the point across to the older guys talking to the younger guys receiving a message from the older guys. You know, or women. I don't mean to use guys just that way, but it's the way people are. Sometimes we just don't know how to communicate. Whenever you know how to talk to somebody in a respectful manner, you'll get a whole lot farther with them. So, perfect example. You got a guy that's, and I've heard that talked about out here with 2 or 3 of the OSHA guys talked about it as well. You got a guy that's been there 30 years, okay? He's been there and he said, this is the way I've been doing it for 30 years. I ain't changing, I ain't gonna do it, I ain't gonna fix the way I do it. If you don't like it, I'll quit. Don't let the man quit. Don't let him go. Because I can promise you this. Somebody will get hurt. And most likely it may not be him. It may be somebody working around him, working for him, working with him. Maybe you. But if somebody won't change, we had to let a lot of people go in our line of work. A lot of people thought that, man, that wouldn't be a line to me. It's good money. They like to work. They like being outside. They like what we did. But it just ain't for everybody. You had to walk up to them and just tell them, hey, you need to find you another job. This ain't you. You're going to end up getting killed, and I'm not going to go talk to your parents or your family, your wife, or whoever it is, and sit there with them and tell them, you know, look, I'm sorry, you don't want to be that guy. You do not want to sit in an ER looking at a family, kids, wife, parents, and having to tell them, well, you can't tell them anything because you may not know or you may not be able to tell them the circumstances around the accident. All you can do is just sit there and listen. You don't want to be in that situation. Trust me. My family was. So that's what I want you to talk to you about a little bit about now is so I spent 23 days in that ICU, flat on my back, most of them. When I got out, I had 7 months of occupational therapy. It was 5 days a week, 7 hours a day, just like I went to work. For me, that was my new job. I was learning to be independent and take care of myself. I was learning everything I'd ever learned in the first 28 years of my life. I had to relearn in that 7 months took me long enough to relearn. So whenever I walked out, I could take care of myself. I still had all my hobbies I had to relearn. I had to relearn all the things that she wouldn't teach me, couldn't teach me. Things I just had to learn at home, going home doing it by myself. I was off work for 10 months, 23 days, so I went back to work in less than a year. Amputate both hands and get back to work in under a year, that's a pretty good time frame. You don't find a lot of them that can get back that quick. But I wanted to go back. So I went back to work as an inspector. I inspected our line clearance crews. They worked for us, mostly Asplin crews. And did that till I retired and left. And then I started doing this. But you need to understand one thing. There's only one reason why I'm standing up here doing this right now. There's only one reason. And that's because I care about every single person I talk to. Because most of you, other than last night, I don't know any of you personally. None of you. But I do care about every person I talk to. Never want to see this happen to you. Or I never want to see it happen to your family. See what happened to my family happen to your family. It's devastating. devastating whenever I tell you about those things that happen to them. When you think about me laying in the hospital bed, you've got a physical issue, losing both hands, then you got a psychological issue that you just can't wrap your head around unless you've ever been there. Pick a psychological disorder. Probably had it. Probably went through it, you know, and just over the course of years. It's just the way it is. When you lose limbs like this in that traumatic way, you're going to go through some bad, you're in some dark places. And that's just the way it is. Trying to get your life back together, you have to. And I did. I got through most of them. And a couple things rattling around upstairs that's still there that won't leave, but most of it is pretty good, you know. But if you ever think that you can go through something like this and walk away and just not have a problem, you're lying. You're being lied to. You're lying to yourself, because it doesn't happen. I don't care what you think you can do. It just doesn't happen that way. And I tell people this all the time. Think about people that have seen combat. Men and women that have been in combat. If they've seen traumatic things like that, they may not talk to you about them. They remember it. So let me ask you this. When you go back to that day, sitting in that yard, my crew was right there when they pulled my gloves off. And they were sitting there looking at me. I had one in front of me and four behind me, watching the whole time. What do you think Brian, my buddy, pulled my gloves off. What do you think the most memorable part of that was for him? What do you think he remembers the most about that day? Come on, somebody tell me something. Huh? The explosion? Yeah, he remembers that. Me and him, Brian works at another utility. Every single one of those men that I work with, not every one of them, but probably about 70% of them, all left and went to do safety work at other utilities right now. That's what they do. All around where we live. So, the one thing that he remembers the most is the smell. When he aimed my gloves off, his head was right there and my hands were right here. You ever smell burning flesh? You won't forget it. You ever do. And that's what he remembers. That smell hit him right in the face. He and I, we'll be eating, we'll be doing something, we'll be talking, and I've worked for him a lot of time. He'll tell me, I still remember that. Still flashes, there'll be triggers that will bring it back to his head. And he'll never forget it. So you see, there's so many people involved in these things that never, ever forget that. I had a guy that was a lineman on my truck, not on my truck, on another truck. He introduces me at TVA meetings all the time. He's the IBEW VP, shit way up there, okay? So he'll be introducing me, but he can tell 200 or 300 people in the room where he was at 30 years ago, the yard, the corner, the time, the address, the part of the yard he was standing in whenever the 911 call went out over the radio. He still remembers that. Every little aspect and detail of it. Until the time he went to bed. He didn't forget it. Other people didn't forget it. It has impacts on people that you have no idea. There was a crew that had come in behind me. My job wasn't done, so it wasn't like, oh my God, we lost it, got burned, this is done. No, the job wasn't done. The woman still had to have her electricity. So another crew had to come in behind me, another line crew had to come in and take up where we left off. Because they sent everybody else home. After the helicopter left with me, everyone else got sent home. So the other crew rolls through, and they're all guys that I've worked with over the years too. They're all guys that, we all work together at some point in time here on different trucks. But they roll through there, they have to come in. And there's one guy, okay, and he's walking around the ground, and he's just looking, he's kind of just checking out stuff on the ground, and he's looking at everything, and he walks across the bolt cutters, and he sees them, he's sitting there looking at their bird porch, that got big gouge in them from the contact, and he's just looking at stuff, and he comes across my gloves. And for whatever reason, he's just standing there, he's just stuck, he's just standing there looking at them. Not able to, move. And as soon as he left, crew got through, He went in that afternoon, picked himself out of the line of park. He didn't want to be me. Yeah, you got to understand. He didn't want to be me. And, because I asked him, so what the hell did you do this for? What'd you take yourself out? I only met him for probably about 3 or 4 years ago. He finally told me the story. I said, what'd you do that for? He said, I didn't want to be you. He said, I don't want to be flown away in a helicopter or in a bed. He said, so I got out of the department, out of the electric department. That's what I'm saying. This has impacts on people that you'll never know until you see them or ask them. So they're the first people that are affected by your accident. Would you agree? Who do you think the second people affected by your accident would be? Huh? Family. That's right. We spend more waking hours at work than we do anywhere else. Okay? You're closer to your family, though, than you are anyone else. Now, when you go home, you're going to realize that. Okay? Because whenever I went back home, it took me 23 days to get there. Okay? I walked out of my house by 7 o'clock going to the work center that morning. 23 days later, I got to come back home. Now, while I'm in the hospital, all 23 days, my hands are gone. What's that mean? That means that I have nurses in the hospital that have to 24/7, they have to take care of every single need that I have. Feed me, give me therapy, all the things that they do for me. Plus they had to do all the other stuff too. You know what I'm talking about? Everybody know what I mean? All the stuff that you want to talk about, the bathroom, all that stuff. Yeah, they had to take care of that. That's what they had to do. So that in your hands. Now when I got out 23 days later and I walked back through my door and I go back home, who has to do that now? My wife. Really need to consider how fair this is to the people that love you. Because it is really unfair. Seriously. Think for a second now what they would do, because you don't know what they would do. You can't say. There's no way you can say. Unless you've been there. Yeah, I've talked to men over the years, they're divorced, suicides, worst things that you could imagine they went through. Mine happened the same way. Not suicide, but the other. So that's a consequence of what happens whenever you choose to take shortcuts. So I had to own this whole thing. This is all personal accountability. I'm standing here telling you whose fault this was for a reason. Because I want you to understand, I did this. I did this to me. So I did this to them. So my wife did this, that's the way it ended up. My daughter was born 14 months after my accident happened. My daughter's never known me to have hands. She was all right, but out of all the men and the women that I've talked to over the years, their kids, most of their kids have been on this earth already. For a child, it's very hard to deal with his mother or father leaving their house and coming back days or weeks or months later not looking the same way they did. Missing body parts, stuff, blind, deaf, whatever, burned traumatically, whatever happens, it's very hard for a child to deal with that stuff. They don't know how. For them, they have to have therapy. Some of them have to have therapy. Some of them have to have help, outside resources to help their children. And you have to understand that because it's just unfair to a child to put them in that situation. They don't know what to do. Unless somebody helps them, bad stuff happens. I promise you their grade point average doesn't go up. That's one thing that doesn't happen. When you want to watch kids act out and get in trouble in school and they've been through stuff like this, it's because nobody was there to help them, get them through it. So, whenever my daughter, I'm trying to get away from the wind. So my daughter, she made it there. She's fine. She's grown, got her own kids and everything now. But it did bother her. It did affect her a little bit. I was by the way, the best show and tell project she ever had at school. It's definitely the best show and tell project. I was in class more times than she was probably. You know, they would she'd bring me in every time she'd change every grade she went to, I would be back in class. So you told you about your colleagues, people that you work with, okay? You thought about that. Thought about your spouse, how they would react, what would they do? Thought about your kids, what it would do to them? What impact would it have on them? And I want you to think about a group of people that you really don't think about a lot, and that's your parents. Most of you in this room, I can tell by looking out here, your parents are probably still on this earth. Mine are. So for those of you that they're not, think about it as being a parent. So my parents lived in the same city. We all lived in Memphis. My father knew my supervisor and my electric guys and all the people most of the guys there. But he knew them, and whenever my accident happened, my safety supervisor had to call my father. You need to get down to the hospital. When he's had an accident, only thing he can tell him is not a car accident, not a vehicle accident. He's had an accident, but you got to get out of the hospital. So my father has to get my mother. They have to rush down to the hospital, and it is just like you would see in a movie. You walk in that ER door, you got a doctor standing there, and he gives you about 5 minutes of his time to tell you what he's got to tell you. And he's headed back upstairs. That's exactly what he did. He tells them, look, he's here, we got him upstairs, we're trying to get him stabilized. I've got doctors and nurses up there working on him right now. They have my arm, they haven't done anything yet. My arm was just flayed open, it was about that wide after they got through with it. And laid out on the operating table, and they're trying to find something in there alive. But he can't. So he tells them, he says, we haven't been able to find anything yet. He said, but, I can tell you this. I'm not going to do anything tonight, but tomorrow you might want to be prepared for the starting of amputations. He said, I'm not going to do it tonight, but get prepared, get ready. They're all, they're all right, they get prepared, whatever. But that's when it started, was the next day. What did I just do to the two people that brought me into this world? Just tore their world up. See, they took them years. They're sitting there with my doctor, so my father, he's sitting there and he's looking at my doctor, and my father, comes up with this little ingenious idea. He looks at my doctor, he says, I got an idea. He's taking me to the operating room. He's left-handed, I'm right-handed. He's my son, my biological son. Share same DNA. He said, just amputate my left arm and sew it onto him. My doctor says, I can't do that. You gotta remember, this is 1991. He said, for one thing, he just lopped your arm off and sew it onto it. It doesn't work that way. He said, it takes me a team of surgeons, and and I don't know that I can just take yours. But he was willing to do that. He was willing to give it up. Like I said, what did I just do to him? It's hard on families. And it's very unfair, because when you think about taking a shortcut, or you think about getting complacent or getting distracted and not reeling yourself back in, all you're doing is being selfish. It's all about you. Well, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get done with my job. I've gotta go. It's just all about you at that point. You're not thinking about them. You're just thinking about you and what you gotta do and what you need to do, and get your... No, they're more important, trust me. More important than that. Don't ever shortcut them. Don't ever do this to them. So, like I said, I went back to work and retired. So I've already walked you through all the ripple effect of how this happens to people. What it does to everybody in your family. Okay, what it does to the people that you know. You can put me back out, and there's guys at the light company that I was working at, that every one of those guys are retired. But they all know who but the ones that are there now, they all know who I am. Short of my accident, I was working. hold your kids. Then, whenever you do, it's going to hit you like a brick, what I just said. Because you're going to understand what you have to lose if you take shortcuts. You get complacent. You get distracted. You do things you shouldn't do. That's how important it is. That's how important it is. That picture says it all. So do that when you go home. Send me a message. Let me know how it works out. What you think. So what I want you to do is live a positive, life-changing life and leave an unforgettable legacy of safety. Everyone's going to know how safe you are. That's what you need to leave in this world. Thank you for being here. Thank you.